Hi there. There's a lot of change happening, and a lot of ways in which we we respond to that negative change that we perceive as negative, whether that's a reduction in our income or an, a loss of grant funding, if we're thinking about some of the changes that are happening right now, or whether it's about the social, political, climate context that we're living within at the moment. And in this quick session, I just wanted to share some learning that we've had at People Make It Work around how we, as humans, often respond to change that's difficult and that we perceive as negative. It might be about the end of a relationship, reduction of financial conditions, a negative diagnosis related to our own health and well-being, or someone that we care about. It could be about some challenges at work or in the wider society and economy. And so I just thought I would share that with you in this blog post, and you'll find the slides that I'm going to share in this little video also in the as a link in the blog that includes this video as a context. So I'm speaking today from the context, or through the perspective of being one of the directors at People Make It Work. And we're a collection of 65 freelance cultural workers who work together, united in supporting the cultural sector to change, develop and transform. And some of the things I'm sharing kind of have emerged through the work that we've been doing together. So I wanted to talk about the Kubler-Ross curve when we're thinking about change that we perceive as negative and how we often respond to that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we might manage transitions, and then finally a little bit more organisationally what some of the steps are we might take. And when I'm talking about the Kubler-Ross curve, I guess I'm recognising that the insights that are contained within that might reflect a neurotypical view of human behaviour. And that as we're thinking about how we support individuals through change, then all that we know about the range of neurodiversity that exists within our families, ourselves, our organisations and communities will be really relevant information. And we might think about the people that we actually know and work with and how they actually respond to change when I'm talking through this model. And you might modify the way that you understand and support them based on what you know of their individual circumstances and reactions. But I suppose what Kubler-Ross teaches us is that that over time, it's likely that we'll respond differently to change that we feel is negative and that's happening to us. And that different approaches might be useful in supporting each other through those stages. And those stages might be different for each of us and are different for many of us. But according to the Kubler-Ross curve, and I find this a useful way to frame some of the ways that we witness people reacting to change, the beginning of that process might be a period of immobilization. And so my first reaction to hearing about some negative news might be to appear to just continue as before. It takes a while for many of us to process information. And so we might be simply mobilized by it and be given some news and then continue as if we haven't heard it. And I think it's important for us to notice that that doesn't mean that it's not affecting us. It doesn't mean that we've digested that and processed it and are unaffected. It might mean that the effect is yet to show itself. The second stage that you might see, according to Kubler-Ross, it would be a period of denial where we might sort of actively seek to avoid exploring and interrogating the implications of the change for us. And that might mean that we don't want to talk about it. It might mean that we divert our attention. It might mean that we actively engage in subverting the reality in a sort of King Canute way of denying that the water's coming in. And for many of us, what can be helpful in that context is being encouraged to explore, to being asked questions, with compassion, being asked questions about what are the implications of this for you. What options do you have? What do you see some of the repercussions of this information to be? When do you want to start exploring those, or when might you want to engage with this a little bit more? And also a reiteration can be useful for some people at this time. So reiterating the fact that this is happening and restating some of the facts as we know them can be useful for helping to shift people from this sort of phase of denial. It might mean that they move into a phase that's a little bit more like Kubler-Ross's anger phase. So this is a sort of peak of visible, audible response. And it feels a bit more like frustration that the change is happening and that I can't stop it and I can't control it. And perhaps I'm feeling a sense of unfairness, I'm feeling a sense of anger. And quite often that anger might be directed kind of inaccurately, to things that aren't the cause of the change, as well as things that are. So if I have faith, I might be frustrated and direct that frustration towards the deity. I might be angry with my mug or my partner or my colleagues or the weather or the transport situation, or a range of things might misdirect my anger. And at times like that, it can be useful to reinforce the fact that this is natural and that we as many of us as human beings will feel these sense of frustration and rage at these times. And I might be supporting people to think about how they can healthily redirect that energy, how they can get support, how they can make sure that they're being heard, that they're creating opportunities to kind of exercise some of that frustration, but also that they're protecting others from it. So it's okay to feel angry about things. It's not okay to take that anger out on others who might be around us. So how do encouraging people to process that and take responsibility can be really useful, I think. So typically, as I go through this process, as many of us go through this process of responding to news that we perceive as negative, we might have that stage of immobilization, then a stage of denial, then a stage that's more like Kubler-Ross's stage of anger. And then we might move into a phase that gets described sometimes as bargaining, where I'm aware that the change is happening, but not yet ready to acknowledge that it'll have a direct effect on me. And so I might be acknowledging that things need to change, but not things for me. And at that stage, some compassionate reiteration of the circumstances of the fact that change is happening can be useful for helping to keep people moving through this process, as well as recognizing that it's natural to take a while to process the real implications and to generate really useful solutions and responses, and perhaps encouraging people to test whether the ideas they're coming up with do fit with the reality, or whether they might still need a little bit more adjustment. Sometimes I think bargaining is the last stage of denial, where I'm still not really accepting the implications for me. And after that, we might end up in a stage that Kubler-Ross describes as depression. And I don't think normally we're seeing that as a sort of medical condition. I think we're seeing it more in the realm of a sort of suppression of my hope and my sense of ability to withstand these things that are happening. So a sense of defeat. And again, like, it's really natural. Everybody might not experience it, but many people might. And that sense of defeat can be supported by universalizing it. It's natural for us to feel like that at this stage. We've heard some stuff that's difficult. Can feel overwhelming. It can reduce our ability, our resilience for a short period of time. And this too will pass, and we'll find our resourcefulness again. And as people are ready to start to look for that, then we can be encouraging them to think again about options. So what are the implications? What might we do? How might we move forward? What kinds of solutions might be useful? And that will take us into a phase that Kubler-Ross describes as testing, where I'm kind of accommodating the change and trying on a range of potential solutions. Maybe there's some cuts to my expenditure, maybe there's some changes to my way of living, maybe there's some new approaches to my work. And that takes us through to a phase that Kubler-Ross describes as acceptance, where it doesn't mean that we've decided this was all really good after all. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that we've perhaps acclimatized and accommodated some of the change that's happening. So I was thinking that that might be a useful frame for us to think about, well, how are we able to understand and perhaps bring compassionate support to our colleagues, whoever they are and however they're responding. And Kubler-Ross gives us a framework for that. I don't think it's, it definitely doesn't describe every way that each human will react or every useful thing you could do, but I think it maybe gives us some ways to think about that. Another frame that I think can be quite useful is Bridges' model around transitions. And so I wanted to share that with you as well. So what transitions helps us think about is that there are probably some phases as we are accommodating changes that are happening in the world. And that first phase might be one of shock, denial, fear and anger. As I hear what's happening, what the news, I then might go into a phase where everything's unsettled, foggy, much less certain, because the future I could picture has been interrupted and the new future hasn't yet got the same clarity in my head that that old future had. So I'm likely to be feeling quite questioning, quite uncertain, probably demanding answers from others, even those who might not have any. And then there's a third phase, which is about kind of beginnings, which is about, I suppose, accommodating the new and understanding how we can move forward. And that might have more excitement in it. I think it's worth recognizing too that amongst our community, our families, our work colleagues, the wider society, different people will be at different stages with this. So some people that might have instituted change might be seeing it as a beginning, while some that haven't seen it coming might be seeing that be in that first phase. Certainly when new leaders join organizations, they often come with a beginning mindset, and people in the organization might well still be in an ending mindset. So we might think about what do we need to do together to kind of recognize that what is stopping, what is ending, what needs to be put to bed, what are the questions that are creating a sense of confusion and anxiety, and how do we manage those during this time? And where might some of those opportunities be that take us forward in the future? So I quite like that model for just helping us to recognize that there's something happening that's sequential, but also something that different people might be at with different energies in. And it reminds me of, when a relationship has ended, you might be in an endings phase, and if people come to you talking about there's plenty more fish in the sea, or whatever euphemism they use, that's a beginning story, and you're just not ready for it very often. You can't even see how to live without that relationship, let alone start a new one. So you're definitely in that first phase you're not ready to hear about the third phase, and you've got that second phase to go through. Of course, that's not universal, and many of us have different ways of seeing and processing these kinds of conversations, but hopefully it's a useful model that you might want to think about. The third thing I wanted to share at this time was a model that thinks a little bit more about how we might create a shift in perception in order to adopt some new ways of thinking and working. So, and it recognizes that we have these phases that we need to go through. So I notice sometimes in government communication that we're told about things ahead of time, and our awareness about an issue is being raised in order that we become interested in solving that issue. If we think about climate, that preparation phase for some has really happened, for others less so. And until their awareness and understanding is at a certain level, then they won't be interested in taking steps. We won't be interested in taking steps to address it. And a bit the same when we're thinking about our own financial well-being, our own life and circumstances. So in this model, what we can see is that there's a phase when I need to make contact with people and share the fact that there's information that they might not know, which builds awareness. And we talk about that helping people get across a disposition threshold. So I've now moved from perhaps complacency and comfort to curiosity and interest in something needing to change. I might be demanding change, or I might just be accepting change, but I'm recognizing that it might be needed. And recognizing for everyone compassionately that if they're not asking for that or accepting that yet, it might be because we need to do some work at the level of awareness, which is why that restatement I mentioned before is so important. Is a more compassionate way than like just going, why don't you understand? It's like, well, I haven't crossed that disposition threshold. So we might think about, well, what might it take for somebody to be feeling the same? What experiences might people need to have in order for them to be feeling the same as I am about the need for this change to happen? And that would take us into this acceptance phase where I'm ready to explore. And at that stage, I'm giving people more information. I'm seeking to build positive awareness around the options that we might have. So whether this is a conversation I'm having at home with my family, in my community, or at work. And then that takes us up to a point where we are willing to try. So we might pilot something, we might adopt it, we might embed it, but that takes us up to that commitment threshold. And I'm not able to get to that until I've been through some of those other stages. So when I was thinking about how we might all react to change that's happening to us, part of the transition from change happening to us is that we make change that matches the change that's happening to us in order that we can survive well and thrive in the future changed world. And so quite a lot of that feels like it's about building awareness and understanding, building options and ideas, and then taking us through to a place where we've got things that we can now have a go at delivering, have a go at changing, have a go at trying, with an awareness that like we won't get it right to start with, and it'll take us a while. So I'm hoping that those models that we've been using here at People Make It Work might be useful when we're thinking about supporting our families, our communities, our organisations through some of the changes that are coming at us that can fast at the moment. There might be ways of thinking across reactions about what it might be useful to kind of compassionately, constructively introduce to help make that process of shifting as smooth and easeful as possible, even when it's undesired, difficult, and takes us into territory that we'd rather not be going into. People Make It Work, there's 65 of us who are mainly freelancers working across the cultural sector, united in supporting the cultural sector to change, develop and transform. And we've got free resources as well as paid for programs and consultancy that we offer. And at the moment, we're offering free one-to-one surgeries if it would be useful to talk about any of these things in a bit more detail. If so, go to our website, peoplemakeitwork.com, and there's information there about how to go about arranging that. I hope it's been useful. Take care, and know that we're here to support you both personally and institutionally as you move through these really complex and challenging times. Thank you.